I'll learn you. Diversity, teach me. I teach you like university. Freedom be.
What's up, everybody? It's Dr. CI, and I am back in the building with season 5 of our learning series. Now, this series, we're going to focus on things like microaggressions, current events that are happening in the world that are associated with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So don't forget to turn on those notifications and subscribe to the channel so that we can talk, right? And educate one another and learn together. But what are we talking about this season? On this episode, first, we're going to be discussing racial microaggressions. So if you've seen any of our other seasons, you've seen that I've discussed things like microaggressions as a whole, different types of microaggressions. What does that mean? Well, in this season, I'm gonna break down each different subcategory of microaggressions, okay? So first, we're gonna be talking about racial microaggressions. What are racial microaggressions? As a quick reminder, if you haven't heard of what microaggressions are, or you've never come in contact with them, or you don't understand, let me break it down for you. Microaggressions is a subtle slight or something that is offensive that someone does to you based on your identity, right? And it offends your identity. So remember, it's a subtle slight. It's often unconscious. It can be verbal. It can be environmental. It can be nonverbal. It can be behavioral. All of these things can be considered microaggressions. Y'all got that? And if you don't, you can always check out our previous season to see the actual video on microaggressions. Now, first, in racial microaggressions, I'm going to be talking about assumptions of criminality. What does that mean? Assumptions of criminality means if and when you see a person who is a non-white person, you assume that they're a criminal. It's like, for example, if you in your car and a black male walks past your car and you lock your doors, because it's just a reflex, right? You're like, oh, I lock my doors when any person walks by my car. Do you? Or if you're in a store and you see a black person or a person of color or an indigenous person walking around the store and you follow them because you think they're gonna steal. It is literally because you look at a person's identity and you think that they are a thief. The next is exotization. What is exotization? Exotization is when you look at a person who is of a different racial and ethnic background and you start to fetishize them based on their, for example, physical features. Like you look at Asian women and you exotize Asian women. You have this fantasy about Asian women. They're sexy. You think they're different. So you fetishize about them. You exoticize them. Or you see a black woman, you're like, oh, black women are just so beautiful. I only love black women because they're just so beautiful, right? That's a racial microaggression. If you are fetishizing someone based on their race and you say that one race, for example, looks better than another, that is a microaggression because it is exotization. Next is assumptions of intellectual inferiority. See it as it goes across the bottom of the screen. What does that mean? It means, for example, that you think that someone is ignorant because of their race. You think that they're not smart enough. You say black people lazy, black people stupid, right? Or even on the other side of the polarity, you have an Asian colleague and you assume that they know math and they're great at math because they are Asian. That is an assumption of intellectual superiority, which could also be a microaggression. But to look at a black person or a BIPOC person and say, I don't think you're smart enough to help me handle this problem. Or I'm not gonna hire you because I don't think you're smart enough to do this job, even though you have all of the qualifications. That could be a microaggression, right? Because you're assuming that they're not smart based on their race. And last but not least, pathologizing your cultural values. What does that mean? So for example, let's say you go into work and the workplace is really loud. And you like, why black people so loud? Why Asian people so loud? Why are all these people making this noise? We just need to learn to be quiet, right? Because you have to understand that the preference for silence has often come at the hands of silencing minority voices, racial minority voices, etc. It's like if you listen to loud music, something is wrong with you. If you speak loudly in public, something is wrong with you. What that does is it negates the expression that other cultures might have. Other cultures might sing and dance and talk loudly and celebrate, and culturally, there's nothing wrong with that, but we see it as wrong because if you grew up in a space where noise, for example, is not accepted, you might punish somebody who is loud or noisy. You get what I'm saying? That is pathologizing your cultural values onto someone else. That is a form of a racial microaggression. Now, let's go back through it again and think about the 4 things that we've talked about in summary. We've talked about assumptions of intellectual inferiority. We've talked about pathologizing your cultural values. We've talked about the assumption of criminality. And we've talked about exotization. Y'all got all 4 of those? If you don't, go back and play this video again. Because what's coming up next is the strategies. Are y'all ready for the strategies? Let's get into it. What's the first thing you should do to understand if and when you have microaggressed someone? I want y'all to hear this. I want you to see this. I want you to practice it. Shut up. If someone corrects you and says, hey, that offended me, by nature, human beings naturally go into a state of, oh, I didn't mean to do it. I have Black friends. I have Asian friends. There's no way I can discriminate against Asian people, etc. Yes, you can. And if someone takes the time to tell you what you did offended them based on their racial identity, shut up. Accept correction, apologize for your mistake, and keep it moving. The next is to acknowledge someone's feelings behind the statement. So let's say I'm talking to my friend and I say, hey, that's a racial microaggression. And she's devastated. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. She listened and she heard me. Next, you have to apologize. And one of the ways that you apologize is by acknowledging the feelings behind the statement. So you say, I'm really sorry that I made you feel that way. I'm really sorry that I offended you. You have to take accountability for the action. Because to say to someone, I'm sorry that you feel that way, that within itself is relinquishing you from accountability. And that's wrong. No, you offended that person. You apologize for offending that person, right? Now, this is what happens in the moment of a confrontation. Some people want to know, how do we prevent racial microaggressions? You got to expose yourself to more people of color or Black and Indigenous people of color. You have to open up your networks, etc., so that you understand the different experiences that people have based on race. Because if you're only surrounded by people who look like you, you are more than likely to offend people who don't look like you. So you have to be intentional about hiring more BIPOC populations, creating support systems for more BIPOC populations, being an ally and an accomplice, and making sure that you go and support your people. Do y'all get that? Y'all understand that? Those are your strategies. This has been a quick conversation about racial microaggressions. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and turn on that notification button. And I'll see y'all again. I'm Dr. CI, and I am leaving the building. Y'all have a great day.